The sound of violin music and the faint clinking of crystal glasses echoed throughout the grand hall of the Skyline Imperial Tower. High-hanging crystal chandeliers cast a warm golden glow, reflecting off couture gowns and bespoke suits worn by London's elite. Everything in this space, from how champagne was poured to the half-hidden, half-flamboyant laughter, was designed to project one message: only the chosen belong here. At the hall's center, Isabella Harrington, with her blonde hair neatly tied back and an emerald green Dior gown hugging her figure, approached a black woman wearing a plain black dress without embellishments, stones, or logos. Isabella's gaze was not one of curiosity but of cold assessment, as though she had just spotted an ink stain on pristine white silk. "Excuse me." Isabella's voice cut through the lively conversations around them. "I don't recall seeing your name on our guest list." "Doctor." Amara Ellington did not lower her head. She looked up, her eyes calm yet deep, as if reading every beat of the other woman's heart. Only a small black clutch was in her hand, no excess jewelry, no ostentation. "Perhaps you should check again," Amara said softly, her tone not raised, yet enough for a nearby group of guests to turn their heads. A ripple of silence seemed to spread. Men in tuxedos froze with their glasses halfway to their lips. A few women discreetly leaned forward for a better look. And then, a faint click. iPhones began recording, cleverly concealed behind champagne flutes. From the left, Catherine Harrington, Isabella's mother, stepped forward, her pearl necklace glinting under the lights. She glanced at Amara up and down before turning to her daughter. "Even the help should know their place, darling." A soft chuckle came from Marcus Harrington Jr., Isabella's younger brother, holding his phone up to record for his Instagram story. "Dad, call security," he said, eyes still fixed on the screen, already planning the caption for the clip. In the distance, Lord Richard Harrington, the family's patriarch, raised his champagne glass, the light from the chandelier glinting off his Rolex, and nodded toward two security staff in black suits. They began moving toward Amara. Amara did not move. She merely glanced at the minimalist steel watch on her wrist, a timepiece that a keen eye would recognize as a limited edition Philippe chronometrix, something only those in the highest echelon of the financial world could own. The hands pointed to 8:47 p.m. 13 more minutes. Amara thought that they should dig their own grave. The two security guards of the Skyline Imperial Tower approached, their footsteps echoing evenly across the gleaming marble floor. The light reflected off the lapels of their black suits, and the small radio glinted at their waists. The taller one gave a slight nod, his voice deep yet polite. "Ma'am, we'll need to see your invitation." Amara Ellington did not hurry. She opened her black clutch with deliberate slowness, as though the dozens of eyes fixed on her were merely the backdrop for a performance she had scripted long in advance. In the air thick with scrutiny, she drew out a cream-colored card with gold-gilded edges, the embossed logo of the Harrington Global Foundation, sharp and precise. The guard took it, glanced down, then frowned. "Looks to be valid." From behind, Catherine Harrington let out a laugh as sharp as shattering glass. "Looks to be. Richard, didn't our security upgrade the verification process? Fake invitations look convincing these days." Nearby guests nodded knowingly, their expressions carrying the air of common knowledge in their circle. Marcus Jr. kept recording, leaning closer to the camera to whisper, "Tonight is pure gold content." At that moment, a minor yet razor-sharp incident cut through the veil of formality. As Amara slid the card back into her clutch, a business card slipped out, falling to the white marble floor with a crisp tap. One of the guards bent down to pick it up, reading aloud, "Ellington Capital Partners." A few guests furrowed their brows. They had heard that name somewhere, usually on the pages of major financial publications. But before anyone could speak, Isabella arched a brow and let her voice drip with disdain. Probably just some small investment firm, trying to squeeze into a game far beyond its reach. Across the room, Thomas Reed, a veteran financial journalist from the Financial Times, had stopped sipping his wine. He recognized the name instantly, and if his memory served him right, Ellington Capital was the fund that rescued a European industrial conglomerate from bankruptcy in just 9 months. His reporter's instinct told him something big was about to unfold. The Harrington family didn't notice that, at that very moment, on Marcus Jr. Instagram Live, The viewer count had just surpassed 6,000 and was climbing by the second. Comments began to flood in. Someone look up Ellington Capital. Sounds familiar. Isn't that a billion-dollar fund? Amara remained still, the corners of her lips curling slightly, as if she had just heard a funny story. One whose ending only she knew. The grand hall's air felt like some of its oxygen had been drawn away. Guests still held their champagne glasses, but none of them drank. Their eyes moved between Amara Ellington and the Harrington family, as if watching a rare live bout of power play. Isabella crossed her arms, shoulders lifted high. Do you even know what event this is? We don't open our doors to anyone wanting a taste of the high life. Amara tilted her head, her gaze as sharp as a blade wrapped in velvet. Oh, I know very well. Tonight, the Harrington family will announce a strategic partnership with Kingswell Alliance, a deal worth, what was it? 1.4 billion pounds? Her words hit like a stone thrown into a still pond. Ripples spread fast. Several guests turned to whisper to one another. A few instinctively checked their phones, searching for the name Kingswell Alliance for confirmation. Lord Richard Harrington's brow furrowed, the blue in his eyes flashing cautiously. Where did you hear that? Amara shrugged, as if the staggering figure and sensitive detail were nothing more than a weather forecast. In the investment world, large numbers are rarely easy to keep secret. Across the room, Thomas Reed, the Financial Times journalist, had stopped everything, his fingers poised over his phone screen. He knew this was no coincidence. An uninvited guest knowing the details of a significant, yet-to-be-announced deal? That was front-page news. Meanwhile, Marcus Jr. His live stream had surpassed 9,000 viewers. The tone of the comments was shifting. She just stated the exact value of the deal? Who dares challenge the Harringtons like this? Isabella laughed, thin and brittle as a strand of spun glass. Maybe someone fed you a few scraps of gossip. But let me remind you, tonight is no place for the uninvolved. Amara met her gaze squarely, her eyes calm to the point of coldness. Oh, I'm involved. Far more than you could imagine. She glanced at her Philippe chronometrix watch. The minute hand ticked forward one notch. 12 minutes left. Amara thought plenty of time for them to shoot themselves in the foot before I pull the trigger. The rhythm of the hall was slow. In the thickened air, Amara Ellington reached into her black clutch and drew out a slim, gleaming Vertu phone, a piece not just anyone had the right to own. No one knew what she was about to do, until her finger slid across the screen, dialing a short number with only 3 letters. John. A deep male voice came through on the other end, steady and clear. Jonathan. Amara skipped any formalities, speaking a single sentence, each word slicing through silk like a blade. Execute the full withdrawal from Kingswell now. The murmurs erupted instantly, like flames meeting wind. A few guests understood at once. Kingswell Alliance was the star contract of the night, the deal Harrington Global had planned to unveil as their statement of dominance. Lord Richard Harrington's champagne glass tightened in his grip until his knuckles turned white. Isabella took half a step back, her lips parting but no words emerging. Catherine's hand reached for her pearl necklace, as if it were an anchor. Marcus Jr., mid-live stream, suddenly froze. His gaze shifted from his phone screen to Amara's face, then back to his phone, where the viewer count had just passed 15,000 and was climbing like a rocket. Jonathan's voice returned, calm to the point of menace. Understood. Confirming full termination. Amara's smile was slight, not the grin of victory, but the smile of someone who knew exactly where each piece on the chessboard now stood. Isabella tried to regain her composure, her voice pitched high. You just said, withdraw from Kingswell? You can't. Amara cut her off, her tone still soft yet carrying across the hall. Can't I? You're mistaken, Isabella. I just did. Across the room, Thomas Reed had already begun typing the article's opening lines, which he knew would tear through every front page by morning. The minute hand on her Philippe chronometrix ticked forward again. 11 minutes left. Amara thought, more than enough to bury a dynasty. The room no longer carried faint laughter or the clink of glasses. Only the background notes from the violin ensemble in the corner remained, but even the musicians' fingers had begun to tremble, throwing the melody off beat. A woman's voice rang out from the seats near the bar, low, precise, and steeped in authority. Perhaps I should introduce who she is. Every gaze turned toward Dr. Helena Ward, London's leading director of cardiac surgery and an honored guest at the gala. She stepped forward to stand beside Amara, her eyes sweeping over each member of the Harrington family. You are speaking to Dr. Amara Ellington, Chief Executive Officer of Ellington Capital Partners, a private investment fund managing over £52 billion in assets. A woman who has appeared for 3 consecutive years on the Financial Herald's list of the 50 most powerful women in the world. A ripple of whispers broke out, but before it could settle, Amara tilted her head, her smile thin as a thread. Oh, and there's one small detail you might want to know. Ellington Capital currently owns 35.2% of Harrington Global. The words dropped like a weight onto the marble floor. Lord Richard Harrington stood frozen, his hands clasped behind his back to hide their trembling. Isabella's head snapped up, but her eyes betrayed shock and panic. Catherine stepped back, her hand gripping her daughter's shoulder in search of something solid but finding only fear. Marcus Jr. looked at his phone, and for the first time that evening, he stopped the live stream. On the screen, over 21,000 viewers were still watching, but he no longer wanted them to see his face. Across the room, Thomas Reed could hardly believe his ears. 35.2% enough not only to make Amara the largest shareholder, but to shift leadership seats, control policy, and potentially redefine the company's entire direction. Amara took a slow step toward the Harrington family, her high heels striking the floor like the gavel in a courtroom. It seems I'm the one who decides who stays here and who doesn't. The hand of her Philippe chronometrix watch moved forward 1 notch. Amara thought 10 minutes left for them to realize this party was never theirs to begin with. The atmosphere inside the Skyline Imperial Tower now felt like the moment before a great storm, so still that every slight sound seemed unnervingly loud. Amara Ellington turned gracefully, her eyes sweeping the entire hall as if scanning a financial report. Her voice retained its softness, yet every word rang with the cold precision of freshly honed steel. Let me save everyone some time. The Harrington family currently holds a total of 31.2% of Harrington Global's shares, comprised of 12.4% belonging to Lord Richard, 8.7% to Isabella, 6.3% to Marcus Jr., and 3.8% to Catherine. A sharp intake of breath came from somewhere in the crowd. A few guests raised their hands to their mouths, as if unable to believe an outsider could know such exact details. Amara went on, her eyes never leaving the family now lined up before her. With 35.2% of the shares, I am not only the largest shareholder, I also have the authority to call an emergency board meeting, and I will do so at 9 a.m. this coming Monday. Isabella tried to steady her voice, but the tremor slipped through each syllable. You can't do that. Not right now. Amara arched an eyebrow. Oh, Isabella, not only can I will. She turned toward Thomas Reed, now holding out his recorder, and spoke loudly enough for everyone to hear. The emergency meeting will cover 3 agenda points: the immediate suspension of all senior leadership, a full-scale investigation into corporate culture, and the implementation of mandatory diversity standards. Marcus Jr. let out a near-unconscious "damn it." The whispers in the room swelled into a wave. The live stream he had abandoned was already being reposted on at least 10 other accounts, with combined viewership now exceeding 50,000. His face was ashen, and Lord Richard clenched his jaw so tightly that it trembled. Dr. Ellington, what you're doing will destroy us. Amara tilted her head slightly, the last glint of icy resolve flashing in her eyes before the curtain began to fall. No, Lord Harrington. Your attitude and actions have done that. I'm simply ensuring it's recorded accurately. The hand of her Philippe chronometrix watch ticked forward once more. 9 minutes left and the real storm was about to begin. 9 a.m. Monday. The 48th floor boardroom of Harrington Global's steel and glass headquarters was so cold you could hear the wall clock's second hand ticking. The oval-shaped room held a polished walnut table, and at its far end, a panoramic glass wall overlooked a London skyline still veiled in morning mist. Lord Richard Harrington sat at the head of the table, a seat no one had dared to challenge for 3 decades. But today, that chair looked less like a position of command and more like the defendant's bench. Isabella, Marcus Jr., and Catherine sat on one side, their faces stiff, eyes avoiding one another. The door opened, Amara Ellington entered, flanked by two Ellington Capital attorneys and a corporate restructuring specialist. Each step she took was deliberate, the sound of her heels on the floor like the steady drumbeat of an approaching verdict. She sat directly opposite Lord Richard, placing a slim folder on the table. That single gesture was enough to make the entire room hold its breath. "Good morning, everyone," Amara said evenly, her tone calm yet carrying the weight of granite. The voting was swift and merciless. Suspension of Isabella Harrington as CEO. 6 votes in favor. 2 against. Removal of Marcus Harrington Jr. as COO. 8 votes in favor. 0 against. Request Catherine Harrington to step down from the Harrington Foundation Board. 7 votes in favor. 1 against. Amara only looked up from her folder when Harrison Pierce, a long-serving board member, announced the outcome. Dr. Ellington's restructuring proposals are approved. Effective immediately. She nodded, then opened the file, her voice clear. Starting today, Harrington Global will launch the £60 million Minority Enterprise Development Fund, half from Ellington Capital, half from your company over the next 3 years. In addition, all mid- and senior-level management will participate in a diversity leadership program designed by the London Business School. Isabella's teeth clenched slightly. "You're turning our company into a social experiment?" Amara lifted her gaze to her, eyes as cold as a winter lake. "No, Isabella. I'm saving it from you." A moment of silence hung in the air. Outside, the first light of day slipped through the glass, striking the walnut table. It didn't warm the room, but it illuminated one undeniable truth. The balance of power had shifted. The hand of Amara's Philippe chronometrics watch moved forward 1 notch. The game had entered a new round. News of the emergency Monday morning board meeting spread like lightning across international financial and media outlets. Images of Amara Ellington leaving Harrington Global's headquarters dressed in a sharply tailored black suit, a slim folder tucked under her arm, appeared on the front pages of the Financial Times, Bloomberg, and The Guardian under a succinct headline: "Largest shareholder Zeitz's control. Harrington Global overhauls leadership. Immediate impact." Market. Harrington Global's stock plunged 20% at market open, but by midweek had partially rebounded as ESG, environmental, social, governance. Investment funds began buying in, expressing confidence in Amara's new direction. Media. Marcus Jr. His gala, night livestream capturing the entire moment the Harrington family humiliated Amara was shared millions of times, becoming a case study video for crisis management courses. Personal transformations. Isabella Harrington. Suspended as CEO, forced to attend a 3-month leadership reform program focused on diversity management and unconscious bias. Psychological assessments forced her, for the first time, to confront the question, without the family's power, who am I? Marcus Jr. His Instagram account was temporarily placed under company control. The mocking video of Amara had now become evidence against him. Surprisingly, he used the account to highlight Black-founded startups initially as mandatory PR, but gradually with genuine interest. Catherine Harrington. After leaving the Harrington Foundation Board, she began working with organizations supporting immigrant women entrepreneurs, stepping for the first time into parts of London she had never dared enter. The restructuring. Amara replaced the Kingswell Alliance deal, which had benefited only the Old Guard's network, with the Phoenix Supply Alliance, a coalition of over 200 minority-owned businesses across the UK. Early results. Over 3,000 new jobs were created, with a 9% reduction in Harrington Global's operating costs. Ripple effect. Other corporations began approaching Ellington Capital to learn about the Dignity Protocol model. Inside the company, Harrington Global's office atmosphere was transformed. Family portraits that once lined the main corridor were replaced with images of employees from factories, branch offices, and community partners. Monday morning meetings now opened with progress reports on diversity improvements, something unheard of in the company's history. On the top floor, Isabella's former office now belonged to Louise Grant. The new CEO, Amara, appointed a Caribbean-born woman with 20 years in consumer goods and a reputation for brand rebirth strategies. The hand of Amara's Philippe chronometrics watch ticked forward once more. The reform had only just begun. Within 3 months of that fateful gala night, The phrase Harrington Standard began appearing in economic newspapers, corporate consultancy reports, and even in hearings at the UK Parliament. According to The Economist, the Harrington Standard is a set of corporate social responsibility principles based on transparency, diversity, and respect for human dignity, implemented following a public reckoning and producing measurable results. Industry impact. London Business School and INSEAD swiftly incorporated the Harrington case study into their curricula on crisis management and corporate reform. Bloomberg launched a dedicated column tracking corporations adopting the Harrington Standard, ranging from Swiss banks to Nordic energy conglomerates. MP Fiona Clark cited the model when introducing a bill requiring publicly listed companies to disclose diversity data in their workforce. Harrington Global. After the overhaul. Revenue up 21% after 1 year. The Employee Satisfaction Index reached the highest point in the company's history, especially in the manufacturing and logistics departments. Discrimination complaints. 0 cases in 12 consecutive months, a record never before achieved. The Harrington family in the new order. Isabella. After completing the leadership reform program, she returned as director of the Minority Enterprise Development Fund, reporting directly to Amara. She learned to listen, even inviting Black entrepreneurs as strategic advisors. Marcus Jr. His new podcast, Privilege Check, reached over 1.5 million listens per month. The most shared episode? The night I realized I wasn't the main character. Catherine. Her new charity, the Pearl Initiative, funds hundreds of immigrant women entrepreneurs annually, partnering with universities like Oxford and King's College. Amara Ellington and her expanded influence. Amara never sought to become CEO. Instead, she used her shareholder power to ensure Harrington Global upheld its new standards. Meanwhile, Ellington Capital expanded the Dignity Protocol model to over 300 companies in its portfolio. Figures. Companies applying this model reported an average revenue growth of 19% and a 24% increase in employee retention. A new symbol of power. The most iconic image of Amara that year was not from her boardroom walkout or the gala, but from her standing at the UN podium, delivering the words, "Power is not for destruction. Power is for building and ensuring we all step into rooms that were once locked." The Philippe chronometrix watch still gleamed on her wrist, but now, each glance at it was no longer a countdown to collapse. It was a promise of the changes yet to come. 2 years after the gala night at Skyline Imperial Tower, the building still shimmered with lights whenever London slipped into evening. But to many, it was no longer just a symbol of the old order. It had become the birthplace of a new standard in the global business world. Harrington Global had become a living example of how a corporation could fall from the heights to the brink of crisis, and then return stronger than ever by confronting its mistakes head-on. The numbers spoke for themselves. Revenue growth, plus 27% compared to pre-reform. Employee Satisfaction Index, up 31%. Leadership diversity, increased from 8 to 46% in 24 months. The Harrington family now appeared in the media in a new role as public advocates for equality and diversity initiatives. Isabella often stood beside Amara at conferences. Marcus Jr. used his podcast to interview young founders, and Catherine presented the annual Pearl Initiative Award to outstanding immigrant women entrepreneurs. Amara Ellington, the woman who rewrote the rules. Amara never sat in the CEO's chair. She understood that her strength lay in long-term strategy, the ability to shape outcomes without dominating every headline. Ellington Capital managed over £70 billion, with more than 400 companies operating under the Dignity Protocol. The Respect for Human Dignity Business Alliance, which she founded, had drawn over 900 member corporations, employing more than 14 million people worldwide. An eternal moment. At the United Nations General Assembly, Amara stepped onto the podium, the hall lights glinting off the face of her Philippe chronometrix watch, the same one from that fateful night years ago. Her voice was low, steady, and carried across the chamber. Power is not in the ability to make others afraid. True power lies in making others believe they, too, can stand here. 4 minutes of uninterrupted applause followed. In the audience, Isabella, Marcus Jr., and Catherine rose. They no longer stood in the place of the accused, but as people who had learned to change and to contribute to that change. Legacy. The story of Amara Ellington became a required study in many business, law, and media schools. Investors called it the Ellington effect. When financial strength merges with ethical principle, the result is not just profit but legacy. On the top floor of Skyline Imperial Tower, in the very hall that once witnessed the historic confrontation, a steel plaque now hung. May 14, the day Harrington Global pledged that human dignity is its most valuable asset. The watch on Amara's wrist still kept perfect time, but it no longer counted down to a moment of collapse for her. Now, it marked every moment spent building a better corporate world.